Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts. Where every single week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast. And at the end of this episode, we're going to have a brand new recommendation for you guys. And we're going to talk about that one next week. I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week we are talking about how did this get played? Specifically the episode about Mortal Kombat with special guest Nathan Barnett.
Yes, and is traditionally hosted by Heather Ann Campbell, who was in The Twilight Zone and Whose Line Is It Anyway? And Nick Weiger, who is a podcaster that we've covered before on Doughboys. And yeah, Nathan Barnett didn't really ring any bells for me, but when they said that he played a character named Keith Apicary, I knew exactly who they were talking about because I can't remember who it was. It was some pop star at the time. It wasn't anybody like who was gigantic or anything, but she was having dance auditions, and Keith Apicary is a character that he created that goes to things and acts like a dork. He's usually drinking like Capri Suns and playing video games and has like a Walkman on, and then he just starts dancing in, I don't even really know how to describe this, beautifully spastic ways. And it really
it's good.
It is good, but there's there's a lot of flailing happening in the best possible way. So when I there were both of those names that I heard, I was like, oh, well, that sounds familiar. And we ended up looking these up, and that's who they are. And yeah, they talk about a game that all of us are very familiar with, Mortal Kombat. It has
Kimberly
a lot of
Cole.
stuff.
I think that's what it was.
That's the one, Kimberly Cole.
Yeah, I didn't even know that was the name of a singer until right now.
We are also going to link that video in the show notes, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out because it's
good.
Very funny.
It's very funny. Oh man, it's its own thing. And I didn't know that. So I listened to this whole episode by myself before recommending it, not knowing that was this guy, and also not knowing that the other male host of this was the guy from Doughboys, because Zach, we were listening to it and Zach's like, didn't we cover a show that this guy was talking in? Like he was in a show that we covered already. And we looked it up, and sure enough, he was on a show that we have covered, which was Doughboys.
Yeah, another fantastic show. And so basically, they get into all of the really cool stuff surrounding just different games. You know, it sounds like they do a wide variety of old games. I will say that they were the generation like right before us. So I grew up with slightly different variation. I definitely was not, I don't think we had Mortal Kombat until I was much older. And we were able to convince my mom that it was fine because it definitely would not have been when we were young children. But
yeah, so
with that, I
think I've mentioned it before. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying I definitely saw it at arcades because I loved going to arcades, and Mortal Kombat was at every single arcade from my childhood.
But I remember I had a friend that had all the systems, and I loved going over to his house because we would just play Kirby and Mario, and he had the Sega too, so we would play Sonic, and he also had a Game Gear and he had everything. I don't know how he had everything. He had all the things. But I did love going over there, and I do remember that I was told not to ever play. And it was funny because my parents didn't even know that. That's why I went over there to play video games. They just thought I was like, I don't know, playing stuffed animals with my friends or something. I don't know, but we were over there playing video games, and I was told never to play that game.
Never to play Mortal Kombat?
Yeah, and he had it, and I definitely played it, and I did feel like a bad boy for playing.
Honestly, yeah.
Such a bad boy.
I do agree that, like, when you first saw fatalities, the first time you were exposed to that, you're like, oh, wow, this is intense. I feel intense.
This is for grown-ups.
Yeah.
And I felt the same way with Doom. I remember my cousin had a computer, and I think he lived at our house at the time, and he had it on his computer, and I would sneak in there and I'd play Doom, and I would always feel like so scared I was going to get caught.
Yeah, I don't think we really had any. I mean, we had Grand Theft Auto, like the early ones, the like kind of top down ones. And that one you had to like be careful because there was also one that I cannot even remember the name of it, but it was essentially like if you took any structure or story out of Grand Theft Auto, you were just like a just a rough guy. You just like go in a mall and beat people up for no reason, like steal their stuff. So there was a couple of those games like that, but I feel like my mom never really subscribed to the whole like this is going to ruin their brains. And I mean, it only did a little bit, so she was right. But Mortal Kombat did have just this whole kind of air of like mysticism, and also like it's bad, but it was really fun. And like I said, that was going to the arcade. That is, and I mean, I honestly fully believe that us reaching the age where we can drink is why barcades are so popular right now, because they know that we all miss that feeling of walking into the arcade, the sounds of it, the spectacle of walking into an arcade that is filled with games.
Did you ever have a really good arcade to go visit?
I would just go to the one at the mall.
Yeah, I guess that existed. I remember that, but I mean, I think the closest thing to an arcade that I used to go to was friggin' Chuck E. Cheese. But back in the day, they actually had like good games at Chuck E. Cheese. Now it's like garbage games.
Yeah,
like,
that
it's
was
not
the
even
thing. Like, do you remember
games.
like places like Discovery Zone and stuff like that?
Yeah, Discovery Zone
They had
used
good
to have-
games there too. It was like an arcade, but like also like you could do physical
It was
stuff
like
too.
a Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I never have like a good memory of a really good arcade. I do remember going to Chuck E. Cheese and like playing through a whole arcade game and trying to beat it with tokens, at somebody's birthday party or something. So I guess that's a good memory. I think the one that I remember was the Battle Frogs or something, like these frogs that would fight. Battletoads. That's it. So I remember trying to play all the way through Battletoads. I think
Great
that was
game.
at the arcade, but it was.
I think it's like a Metal Slug ripoff essentially, but it's a good one. It's that's what I'm saying is like, but honestly, my memories of like arcade is just when we would all go to the mall, because that was back in the era where that was a thing. We just kind of as a family would be like, we're going to go to the mall and just wander around, do fun stuff, and then we'll eat at the food court. And we're like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Let's do that. And so we would get like, they'd give us like $5 each, which literally walking into an arcade when we were children, with $5, you're literally a king. And we would walk in there and just go to town, just play all the games you possibly can. And so that was probably my first playing experience of Mortal Kombat, because I don't think we had it at my house. I knew what it was because, like I said, I went to arcades and like I remember like the load screen in the arcades is just fatalities, because that was the whole thing. There's like everybody's heads getting ripped off. And I was like Nathan Barnett, and I could never do fatalities. I liked playing the game. I liked playing fighting games in general, but I could never do fatalities. I wouldn't say I really got like anywhere decent at video games until like high school, or like maybe late middle school. I can't remember when we started going crazy on Halo and Soul Calibur, but that was it. But I still remember this kind of like, oh yeah, this game's sweet. And then also the movies were kind of like that too. They were kind of like over the top and violent. And so I definitely had this kind of like nostalgia when they were talking about Mortal Kombat.
I will say that first of all, I wrote down like, these guys are such nerds, but I mean that in like the most endearing way. And also I am very jealous because they were just a little bit before our time, where they had a little bit extra nostalgia for these things.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit jealous of that nostalgia, that they got to experience almost like the beginning, the birth of like real gaming.
Yeah. Because I mean, Atari was before them, but this is when games turned into games, like really started making changes. And I am kind of the same way. I didn't have the same connection to the games they were talking about. I think they were slightly before us. And
it was kind of hard to find an episode for me, because I wanted to bring an episode. I liked the concept of their show, and I listened. I went through their catalog and tried to find an episode of a game that I actually played, because they have a lot of different episodes, but a lot of them are games I've never played, because it's older games that were before my time, or, I didn't have a system, nor did I go to a lot of arcades. So I didn't have that accessibility to these games.
Until you met us.
That's why I picked, okay, Zach, I'm going to be honest. It's the only reason we're friends is because you had systems and I came to your house.
I knew it.
I'm just kidding. To this day, when I come over, it's just because I want to play your video games.
Well, joke's on you. because all we have is a Switch.
No, I'm kidding. I do wish that I had that nostalgia for some of these games, like some of these systems that they were talking about later on, like the Neo Geo. They went off on that, and I see it at barcades.
Yeah, I remember. I didn't know what they were referring to, but then I looked up a picture. 100% remember those cabinets.
Yeah. I went this on Saturday with my kids. We went to a barcade in Lakeland, right down the road from us, and they have a Neo Geo in there. I forget what game's in there. It was some fighting game. I didn't like it. They said it was Metal Slug, and it wasn't. It was a fighting game, which made me sad. But I'm just not good at fighting games. I never have been. So I remember literally I went to an arcade with Mason, and he beat me in the fighting game, and I was trying. Like, this is one of the first times that like my son beat me at a game, and I wasn't letting him beat me. I was like, dang it, I'm just so bad at these kind of games.
I never fully got them. The only one I was ever decent at was Soul Calibur, and then I don't know. I played a lot of Street Fighter, but that was mostly at the arcade. I just liked, that was the cool thing. That honestly, my biggest nostalgia was like that kind of time where you go in the arcade, you put in a coin, and it's you versus like the tournament. That was you, and you just see how far you could get. I could never get very far, but I like that like moment of you've got money on the line. This matters. You know
what's funny is like the more I talk about it, and I kind of feel bad for not being able to go to arcades because we didn't have any. I have a different experience, and it's so different and weird, and maybe people won't even know because I don't think that it existed and doesn't really exist now for very long. I remember going to like restaurants, or like I remember going to a Mexican restaurant and playing an arcade game. I remember going to multiple I guess it still exists at sports bars where they'll have arcade games.
Yeah, Casbore's had great arcade games.
So I remember going to Casbore's. I remember going. My dad used to take me to Beefs regularly because he'd want to go watch football games and drink beer. And he'd take me. He's like, I'm gonna take my son. We're gonna go watch. And I didn't want to watch 4 hours of football, so he'd give me, like you said, $5, and I was a king. And so I'd go back there at Beef O'Brady's and just play whatever game they had.
Oh, like, you know who had a great one when we were kids?
Cruising USA all day long.
CC's. I remember as a kid, CC's was my jam. I'd eat 40 pounds of the worst pizza you can find, and I'd go play video games until I threw up on myself. It was great. It's childhood in a nutshell. But yeah, it was honestly, I have a lot of nostalgia around some games like at the house because my parents were gamers. So we had most of the systems too. But I mean,
really did.
We had to fight my mom to play them. And then there was also 3 of us. So there was
she was really smart she would like get each of you the different system. So then you had to share, even though that probably never worked out. It did
not work out. But what we ended up doing is we'd play together. Like that's what she figured out is if she gets us multiplayer games so we could play at the same time, that's the move. So Mario Kart on Super Nintendo and on Nintendo 64, spent a bazillion hours playing it. Anything that was kind of multiplayer at that time. But I definitely remember games like Super C, which was a Contra game on NES, and like we played all the Mario games. And so I have a lot of nostalgia around kind of home gaming, but none of them were around that. We did play, like I said, once we got into middle and high school, it got a little different.
But speaking of Mortal Kombat in itself, it was kind of its own type of game. Like Still,
I don't remember anything that hit like Mortal Kombat did that used their animation style.
Yeah, it's so unique. I watched it was the Netflix show, and I think Zach was right. It was called The Games That Made Us. It was the same thing that the toys that made us like, and the movies made us.
Yeah, the movies that made us is on there too.
But they did The Games That Made Us, and they were talking about Mortal Kombat, and they showed like there was actual video of them doing the stuff like with a blue screen basically. And it's just so crazy. Like it's weird. And I love how Nathan Barnett put it. It's like you're just controlling GIFs.
Yes, 100%.
Kind of are. And that's why the game kind of feels a little bit wonky. Because like you go from standing to kicking someone in the face, and there's no transition. It's just standing and then automatically kicking. It feels weird.
I like that and we'll get to how they kind of rate everything at the end, but they didn't take points away for it feeling clunky now, because everything is better now. Everything is better now than it was.
Yeah.
And because, I remember the first time I played GoldenEye on Nintendo 64. That was my first shooter experience, and it blew my freaking mind. If you try and play that now, it is unplayable, because it's
so different. It feels wrong. It doesn't feel right at all. Because we're so used to like the way it feels now.
It's the same thing. It's very kind of clunky. I mean, obviously you also have everybody is shaped like a trapezoid. And then you have like, I think it would auto aim for you a little bit. So it kind of messes you up. It's very, very odd to play now. So I think that it's fair to kind of keep them in the context of they did something important for gaming in general. And all games after it were like affected in some way by the decisions they made. But even if it's not like the most fun game to play now, and don't get me wrong, games like Mario and things like that, the control mechanisms are so simple that it holds better, because it's literally jump. Can you push A and make it jump? That's it. But then you get to things that are more complex, and that stuff doesn't hold up as well.
No, I agree 100%. Yeah, like I don't think that I could play GoldenEye and enjoy it. I don't think I could do it.
I have tried and I don't. But you can play Mario Kart N64 and enjoy it all day.
Yes.
For anybody that doesn't know about the game Drink Kart, you should right now. It's a great game to play with your friends when nobody's driving afterwards, because what you do is you must finish X amount of beer in a game. We would sometimes do like half a beer. Some people do a full beer, but trust me when I say this, if you do a full beer, it will not take you long before you are not able to do anything, because me and my brother, Josh, used to get very intense on this. And so we figured out that the best way to do this, because you have kind of an option. Do you drink all of your beer at the very beginning of the race, or do you drink whenever you like stop anyways? And it's inconsistent and you don't really want to stop. So you kind of need to chug the beer at the beginning. So Josh and I, as soon as the buzzer hit, we would just be chugging beer, and then it was just race time. Like, so basically we just got a late start and then you just race. And it's a really fun game. Highly recommend it.
It sounds dangerous.
It is. It's super fun. And yeah, especially for you, because you don't like beer. So you would be mixed drinks and you would have to spend the night.
It would be bad.
Because you would be feeling that very quickly.
Oh man. But I also like when they talked about the lore in Mortal Kombat, because it is just so absurd.
I will say that one of my favorite quotes from this episode, I think, was Nick Weiger said, "I love dense lore, especially when it's stupid." And it's like that. This guy gets it, because yes, it is really fun when there is an extremely complicated series of lore that all is just like, you're like, what are you guys thinking?
Yeah. So like, I didn't even know there was a lore to the game. Like, looking back, I never paid attention that there was like, was there like words like, at the bottom of the screen trying to explain what was happening? And
if I'm gauging correctly what they were saying, I think you had to win to like find out the lore of the person you won with. And so I never found out the lore of anyone because I was terrible at this game.
Yeah, I definitely never beat the game.
It was pre-internet. Now, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, first of all, they did also say that you can look up the Mortal Kombat wiki and like read all the lore. I'm tempted. I'll be honest with you.
I bet you it is fascinating.
I'm
and
tempted
fascinating
to
in
read
like
this.
the stupid way,
Oh yeah, you're reading the rantings of a madman, but it still is interesting. But yeah, I don't know how they think that. What's his name? Goro, the forearm guy is half dragon. It's like which half? The forearm part, or the weird troll looking guy? Yeah, right? I guess I don't know. But yeah, it was really funny.
But it is so funny because they talk about like, you're supposed to, win with Scorpion, and Scorpion is he's been dead the whole time. So you find out at the end that he's dead. Like,
yeah, but they bring him back to life for vengeance, but he can never see his family again. So sad.
So sad. I didn't know that until I watched, because I don't think that I even followed the storyline of the first movie because it was so hard, because it didn't make any sense.
It doesn't really make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
I
This
mean,
newer one,
the new one makes some sense. It's lighter on like the confusingness, but it's basically, I honestly felt like the new one was kind of just a redo. Like,
it's hard to make a story about something that's so bad of a story. That's the problem.
They need to commit more. Like, you need someone that's fully insane to make this movie. I'm pretty sold on this idea. Like, you need to don't ride the middle. Don't try and make it edgy. Make it a ridiculous splatterfest, and then you can hit kind of what they were on. Because honestly, it's insane. All of it is just insane. The whole lore behind it, the whole idea of we're going to make a video game where people just get eviscerated at the end of every fight. All of it is just one level above where you think they should have gone. And that's what the movie should have done. Just one level up of just ridiculousness. And then they could have hit it. And I mean, that's what the 90s tried to do, but it was also the 90s. So they were bad at it.
They were bad at everything. Why did everything in the 90s suck? Everything in the 90s sucked.
They were trying. It just didn't pan out.
Oh man. So they did, and we already talked about it a little bit. They talked a little bit. They even played a clip of the Senate hearings, because the stuff about the violence in this game, and in particular another game called Night Trap, it like got parents so upset that it got all the way to the Senate, and they had a recording of one of the senators saying that this is basically child abuse. Letting a child play this is child abuse.
We've seen that replayed a bunch of times. I mean, I guess this was closer to like the satanic panic, where everybody's worried about the youths of America being exposed to things that were going to make them satanic. And honestly, they're kind of pissed at millennials in general anyway. So I guess it could have been Grand Theft Auto and Mortal Kombat that did it to us. There's really no telling. They could have stopped this by not letting us play video games. No, but they had the same thing with Grand Theft Auto, and it's honestly the game that I remember from childhood that was like, oh, this is the risque game, is Duke Nukem. They had like pixelated stripper boobies in it, and I was like, oh, I can't play this game. This game's rated R. But it would have been like after
there was
this.
Nudity in that game.
Yeah, there was definitely strippers in that game.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But basically, it's just funny to hear them. And I mean, they even kind of razzed him a little bit, because the guy who was saying that this child abuse was fully in support of the war on Iraq. And it's like, oh, okay, let's worry about video games and
real violence.
But like, you know what? Sometimes you need to blow up some people. No, it's funny to like see this kind of weird stuff that's happening. I did look up a video of Night Trap, and I had no idea what was happening until you told me what was supposed to be happening in it. Like, I was literally just watching. I was like, what is happening? Because there's just
I think that's the problem, is it just looks like violence against young women. That's what it looks like. So for those that don't know, Night Trap was another game that came out for Sega Disc or something. It was I don't know. But it was almost like a choose your own adventure. It was like a video. It was all live action. There was no animation. It was all live action. So it's like you were watching like your sitcom at home in the 90s, early 90s, and everyone had their big hair. But then there was bad guys that came in and started like kidnapping people and looked like they were like giving them date rape drugs. It was really bad. It looked bad. But after watching that, the thing on the games that made us, they talk about how like Hasbro, which is the one that made this game, changed the script for the people that were trying to make the game, because these bad guys were supposed to be vampires. Oh, that's what it was. They were not allowed to show any blood. And since it's vampires, they're supposed to be blood. So it makes a lot more sense if there's fake blood, blah, blah, blah. Well, because it's the 90s and, you know, they don't want to have blood, they like made them look like they were like injecting people with stuff. And they didn't look like vampires either. They just looked like they were wearing like trash bags. They looked like they were literally wearing trash bags and were like burglars that were kidnapping
injecting people.
And it just looked so much worse than it actually was supposed to be, which is vampires. Which then you got the fantasy element. It's not as weird and not as scary because it's not
Yeah, it takes it out of reality.
Yeah,
not just people are breaking into your house, injecting you with stuff.
Exactly. And so this got all the way to the Senate.
So
and this is like talked about like child abuse and all this other stuff. It's just like, oh my God. And I remember being brought up with that whole like parental censorship of worried about what I'm going to be exposed to and stuff like that. I wasn't even allowed to watch the Scary Movie till I was like 15. Because like my mom didn't want me to watch scary movies because she didn't like scary movies because they made her feel like scared and stuff. So she didn't want me to ever feel that way. So
I like how you still don't watch horror movies.
I watch horror movies.
What?
I mean, I haven't in a while, but we watched the one in Alabama not that long ago.
That is a good one too. Yeah, we watched Hereditary.
I watch horror movies. Hereditary. That is a terrifying movie.
Yeah, that one sticks with you.
It's not terrifying. It's unsettling. And unsettling movies are the things that like you think about later that you don't want to think about later. And that's what.
Yeah, that one sticks with you. But yeah, no, it is funny that I was the same way. You know, I wasn't allowed to buy anything with the parental advisory sticker on my CDs or anything like that. That's why my first hip hop album was Will Smith, because I was like, Will Smith doesn't curse. I can listen to rap if I want to. But it is funny how
Welcome to Miami.
Yep. It's funny how that was a big part of our childhood, and the Senate did not save us from Grand Theft Auto.
No, it did not. So yeah, it was a great show. It was fun. I will say there was maybe almost 10 minutes of their intro where there was a lot of inside jokes and stuff like that. And I did feel a little bit left out because I didn't know what was going on.
I feel like that might have something to do with the fact that I think the long-term listeners would gain more from that.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I don't knock on it, because I feel like halfway into the show, I understood their character and, you know, where they were coming from and the banter. It made more sense. But it's one of those shows that's so established that they do that at the beginning. It's like Mabim Bam. If you were to go to listen to Mabim Bam and you've never listened to it before, you would be like, what the F is this show? It's garbage. This is garbage.
Yeah, as soon as you start doing Munch Squad, you'd be like, what is happening?
But once you get to know what the characters, like what like the character of the hosts and stuff like that, it makes a lot more sense. So I will say that if you hadn't listened to the show yet, there is a little bit of barrier to entry, I feel like, because even at the end, there was some like inside jokes that they were saying like, goodbye, bucket. I don't know what that means. Like, and then they would say something else. So there's all these inside jokes and stuff, which just makes you want to go listen to more to know what those inside jokes are.
Love inside jokes. Love to be part of one someday.
But yeah, and I have another recommendation for next week. It is The Wildlife. And I was wondering if we could do a show about animals because we just recently did one, but we didn't do one about animals. We did an animal show that was about plants. So I'm allowed to do one about animals. So it's called The Wildlife, and it is the episode is about bears. It says Bears with Brogan Holcombe. And they talk about like, you know, close encounters with bears, you know, bad things that have happened with bears, but also like
good true stories about bears.
How many, you know, this kind of got the learning about an animal perspective as well. So cool. Yeah, so that's The Wildlife, Bears with Brogan Holcombe. And remember,
there's always more to discover.
This was a podcast